It's all Hey everybody, welcome back to the Connection Project with Sally, and we're here for another week, and I'm super excited in this series about breath work and all things breath work, bringing you people during this series over the month that breath work has impacted their life in one way or another and bringing you their perspectives. And today I have Kim McCarthy, sometimes goes by Coach Kimmy, and she's a board certified nurse coach. She's a full-time psych nurse and she works with adolescents, children. She's worked at risk youths. And I was saying to her before we started the recording, I had a lot of people reach out because I was doing this series this month about breath work and how it impacts people. And I was really drawn to her story based on because this is our first time actually meeting. I think maybe we're going to do a breath work together one time. And so I've seen her from afar through the nurse coach world, but I was really drawn to her story because she's working with adolescents, youth. She's worked at risk youth in the past, and she's bringing this work, and this work can be shown in so many different lights, right? I do these long breathwork journeys and some shorter journeys. I bring breathwork in, but I wanted you to hear from a perspective of someone that's working with the kids, right? And what we can do on a very small scale to bring breath to help regulate nervous system of not just adults, which we talk about a lot, but hey, there's a lot of other populations out there. So I'm super excited today to welcome Kim here to the Connection Project and really just share with us what's going on with her in her world, what she's doing, and how breath has impacted her. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself, but welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm
Oh,
excited
yeah,
to be here.
I'm so glad to have you.
Thanks.
So normally we start with, I just talked to everybody, like the Connection Project was born to me because I really was feeling in my own journey, the disconnection and all the social media stuff and technology, even though again, we're on technology here today in Zoom, but how do we connect back to ourselves? And for me, breath was, there was a lot of things for me, but breath has been a big component in my healing journey. And what I see happening with clients and in-person sessions, just every time it happens, I have a in-person session tonight with a group, blows my mind. Like what can happen with breath. And there are so many different aspects, and you are connecting with youth and you're working full time as a psych nurse. Your coaching business, I take it, is a little bit on the is side right now, not full time. But just tell me a little bit how breath helped you connect and what was the impact of breath work on you? How did you come upon this? And then down the line, how are you infiltrating this into the work you're doing every day, which is powerful work, right? I think we can both agree the mental health in this country, maybe the world, is definitely suffering, right? And so we need so much awareness and so much healing work needs to be brought in so we can dive deep into all these different buckets. So yeah, so just
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you're so right. I think I forget just what's going on with mental health because I see it every day. So it's a little bit, sometimes it's, I don't know, I don't want to say numbing, but I'm just so used to seeing it. So I'm desensitized. But when I look at the stats and I hear other stories and I just you're right. There's so much going on, especially my heart goes out to youth because I did like you'd mentioned, I worked with at-risk youth, and I actually worked with incarcerated youth for 15 years back in Massachusetts. And I love youth in general, but there was just something about at-risk or my incarcerated youth population that I really too. But for me, I guess I would go back to probably about 15 years ago. I was in therapy. I was going through a really hard time. I was going through a divorce, and I felt like it was just, I was in a state of shock. I didn't see it coming. I felt like I was blindsided. And yeah, it was probably the worst point I've had in my whole life. I can look back and say that was the most difficult point that I've had. And I often tell people, and it sounds dramatic, but I don't think it is. Like at that point, I can genuinely say that I was not suicidal, but I did not want to be alive. I was just really struggling mentally and emotionally. And I had a therapist and I was going through therapy with him, and one day he had said something to me and he had asked me, "Do you believe everything you think?" And I just said, "Yeah, of course. Like it's coming from inside my head. It's my internal voice. Why wouldn't I believe it?" And he's like, "Wow." He's like, "Kim, I really want you to I want you to look into mindfulness." And at that time I was living in Worcester, Massachusetts, And John Kabat-Zinn actually started his program there in Worcester at UMass. So I started, there was a program, I think it was 3 months. It was a 3 month, pretty intensive program that I did, and it was on meditation. And it constantly went back to, for the most part, anchoring yourself. What's your anchor? And a lot of times it was just the breath. So I just got into breath work and kept it really small, but I started to bring it into, I was again working with incarcerated youth at that point, and talked to my supervisor, can I bring this into the classroom? Because I was a health and wellness teacher. And fortunately, it was great. They gave me a lot of flexibility. So part of my wellness program was, I would call it yoga slash stretching and mindfulness meditation. And so I brought it in and the kids just loved it. It was helpful for them in the moment when they were struggling. It was helpful, especially at sleeping. I feel like I hear from a lot of my kids, even that I work with now, that sleeping is a big issue. So teaching them some tools that they can use, different breathing exercises that they can use at night when they're trying to go to sleep. I am, I think breath work is a superpower. I call it a superpower. I call it numerous things. For me, it was refuge at one point. Now I think it's a superpower. I think it's, great for self-soothing. It's got physical benefits. There's just so many good things about it. It's accessible. It's free. You can do it anywhere at any time. No one has to know that you're doing it, which is amazing. Yeah, I just think it's there, and I think that not enough people are using it, and I want more people to just tap into it. Yeah, and just at the free and accessible part, I was thinking just now, and there's a lot of, with my kids that I work with now, when they come in, we do an assessment and I ask them, like, what are your triggers and what are your coping skills? And a lot of times it's things like fidgets or journaling or music, which is awesome. I'm glad that they have those coping skills. But what if I take away your music? What if you don't have music? What if you don't have your journal? What if you don't have your fidget? What can you do? And that's where I bring the breath work into it. So, and do
Oh, I
some
love that.
education around that.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I've said things similar to that, but I really didn't think about when we take away everything else, really, that what we have, right, is our breath.
Yeah. And I like to say, like, the breath is your friend. Like, it is there for you at every single moment. And life begins with an inhale and it ends with an exhale. It's just there. And again, I want more people to access it and to
I
use
know.
it.
I know. I love it. I feel the same passion. And as nurses, right? Like I didn't really I remember when I was getting into like coaching and my own healing journey and all the things that I was learning and energy work. And I was using breath with my clients, but like alternate nostril breathing. And then I just went deeper and deeper. But I just always was thinking, like, I can't believe I was a nurse for all these years. And right, we're breathing with patients, we're connecting to their energy, but I never really thought about it the way I think about
Mhm.
it. I didn't really have a name for it.
Mhm.
We don't teach nurses that we're like really connecting our energy with the patient, like when we're holding their hand and when we're looking at them and when we're connecting with them when they're anxious and we're having them connect to our calmness through the breath and through that. But we don't really I don't, for me, that was never named. Like it just
Mhm.
happened over time, right? But that's so powerful. So
For
then when you
sure.
can do that with yourself, when you don't even have to have the other person to find that connection with, when you're just connecting with yourself and with your own heart, your own breath, and you can soothe yourself with that, is scientifically, it's not just woo, right? There's science, there's data. We're connecting to that vagus nerve, the parasympathetic. Things are happening in our body when we breathe. And so how we all don't know about that
Yeah, no,
is mind blowing.
you're totally right. And I just did a few days ago, I sat down with my patients. We were all in a room and we were just having some downtime. And I said, hey, let's just do a quick guided meditation. Let's do a little breath work. And there were a few staff in the room and they were like, oh my gosh, that was really amazing. And again, that was coming from the adults in the room as well. And so I think that people are often surprised at what sounds, like you said, it sounds so woo and it's so mystical and whatnot. But the data speaks volumes. The data is there, and that's one thing I love is you walk through the grocery store and on the shelf with the magazine, like mindfulness, breath work, like all of this is front and center now, and the stats are there. And I think people are buying into it a little more, and I'm happy about that. And yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I love it. Every time I have, especially my group sessions, because someone's coming for one-on-one and that's amazing. I love that. But when I'm in a group where some of the people are new and they've never experienced it before, and then they leave and they're just like, I don't even know what just happened.
Yeah.
Like they leave feeling so different than when they walked in. And really, we're just guiding them, even in the mindfulness, the guided meditation, we're just guiding them, right?
Right. Right.
They're doing it. We're just
Yeah. No.
the
It,
guide.
And I think that one thing that I love about it for me anyway is it used to have to be like something consciously. Oh, okay, I'm gonna take a breath when I'm feeling anxious or whatnot. And I realized, wow, just if you keep doing it, if you're pretty consistent, how it just comes naturally.
Mhm.
I'll walk into a situation and that my two superpowers I say are my breath and my self-talk because I'm pretty good at talking myself off of a ledge and all right, Kim, calm down. Like, you got this. What do you need to do right now? Okay, whatever it is. And it's the same thing with the breath. Like, I just find myself just naturally doing it. And so I think that if people realize that over time, it doesn't feel like so much work, just like anything else, like a gratitude journal or whatnot, you actually see the benefits and you want to do it.
I love that you brought that up because it is true, right? So people sometimes, and sometimes I use that example, like you can go in the bathroom, but I love that you just brought up and reminding our audience, right? If this is a practice that you start doing consistently, you build that muscle. So it
Right.
doesn't always have to be used in a time of stress. Actually, if you use it consistently in the morning or at night or whenever you start to build that muscle where it becomes easier, like you're saying, like, okay, because we're human, right? We're living a human experience. So shit is going to come up, right? Stuff during the day
Hmm.
is going to come up. I was just talking to a client earlier today, and I have been feeling so like calm and good for weeks. And then I just woke up this week and was like, what's going on? It was like a switch
Hmm.
happened. Like a switch went off and I had that feeling in my solar plexus, like a little like knot. And I was like, okay. And then every kind of conversation I've had this week has been a little bit like, I feel like a little off. And I don't know and I think it's them, but it's probably me. Like, I don't know what's happening. And then I go into the spiral of, oh, I have been feeling so like neutral and good. And I've had like busy weeks and just not getting flustered. But the reality is I'm human. So I
Hmm.
don't know. The moon it was a full moon. There was all these shifts in the energy, if you believe that. I believe that. And then I just woke up one day and I'm feeling a little bit like sometimes you can't really put a finger on it. You're just feeling a little off.
I.
So what you're talking about for everybody listening is like when I have practices, daily practices, but sometimes like I wax and wane with those, but sometimes we need to bump them up a little bit, or if you haven't started doing them, do them because then
Hmm.
when you're meeting this resistance during your week, you're meeting this person that maybe isn't even causing resistance. It's your energy that's causing resistance. Whatever it is, things do become easier. Those external things that usually bother you a lot are bothering you less because your nervous system is a little bit more regulated. You're starting to build more capacity, right? You're starting to understand. You're just understanding yourself more. You're more self-aware. You build this capacity. So your triggers are sometimes a little bit less, those things in the regular world that piss you off. That's why when we're talking about breath being a superpower, it can be used in so many ways. You can tap into your subconscious. You can take a journey without the psychedelics, honestly,
Hmm.
sometimes. You can help regulate your nervous system. You can build your muscle, your capacity. And then there's physical components when you're breathing all the time, building those muscles. As far as us from a nursing background, like
Yeah.
physically, health-wise, there's benefits. It isn't just our emotional, mental, spiritual state. There's physical benefits from doing breath. So I know I got off on a tangent there, but really what you're saying is like if we incorporate this into our daily life, those other things, we don't only have to use it when we're stressed.
Oh, yeah, I completely. Yeah, and even it's funny you say that because most mornings, if I walk when I just it's become a habit. I walk outside and I let the sun hit my face for a moment and I take a deep breath. So yes, I think you're right. I think it can be used at any time and it doesn't have to be, like you said, a stressful moment. It can be, a breath of appreciation, right? a breath of just grounding, a breath just to bring you back to the moment, like when you're scattered. Like I know for me, I can sit here and start one project and I'll be like, oh, I'm going to go put that dish in the dishwasher. And like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And I catch myself and I laugh, but I'm like, no, Kim, okay, let's slow it down. Let's take a breath and let's bring it back to what we need to do right now. So you're right. I think it can be used for numerous things. I don't think it has to be just when we're feeling anxious or stressed.
And we tend to for me, sometimes I'll pull that out in the beginning of a session, trying to give people ideas on when they can use this. But then I have to remind myself, okay, but I love when people come to my in-person sessions, but they're coming for a journey. So they are going to maybe release some old trauma, some old emotions. But I want them to leave too with something to do in their day to day, right? How they can
Hmm.
incorporate breath in their day to day, because they're not going to come see me. We don't want people to be dependent on anything, right? That's a beautiful thing to be able to do, to breathe in community. But we also
Hmm.
want to bring to them, and we want to bring to the listeners, like what you can do in your day to day and what you
Yeah.
can do. Another piece that I wanted to discuss with you was, because you're working with youths and then you were working with at-risk youths. So what can people, the average Joe that doesn't want to come on a spiritual, intense journey, right, and tap into their subconscious, because there are people that may not want to do that. They're not ready for that. But what can they do? What can they bring at home? And what can they do with their kids at home? Their little kids or teenagers. What can they do? Because you're working with a population. And so this is also, right, we're working with them when they're stressed, but we're working with them for preventative.
Hmm.
Just like we're doing so much preventative. And this is the problem with healthcare. And I don't really want to go down that whole rabbit hole, because we could talk for probably hours on
Hmm.
that, on mental health and the country and where we're at. So we prescribe a lot of medication for people. And I'm not against medication. I'm not against anything. I think, though, my hope is eventually that this Western medicine and a bit of Eastern and this different integrative medicine really starts. And I think the shift is happening, but we start to merge. And so, what can people at home, listeners, do with their kids? And how can they start with that? Because this isn't, like we said, the reason I wanted you here so much is because you're working with this population. And I think can be so powerful for parents at home. What can they be doing when their kids are getting riled up and they're getting riled up, and then they're wondering why their kid is getting riled up, and this whole thing happens, and how can we start preventatively? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I love, love, love the idea of preventative, because you're right. We get to the point, the patients that I see are, oh, gosh, it's honestly, it's heart-wrenching. They're suicidal. They've had suicide attempts. They're self-harming. So I have kids that some of my patients are struggling with that and kind of behavioral, a lot of trauma, lots of trauma. And I'm happy that we're in our society, we're becoming more open to what is trauma and how is it affecting us. And then I have the population that's neurodivergent, more like on the spectrum. Yes. So anyway, I think there's a lot of things that we can do before we get to that point. So I always say start small. So starting small, like when you said parents, the first thing I think of is how can you incorporate, like when can you incorporate breath work into the day? And I know, and don't get me wrong, I know people are busy, but is it could you do it in the morning? I don't know, maybe you can't, but there's so many things you can do. Hey, what's your intention for today to your child before they leave for the day? Hey, let's take a breath together. I have a workshop series coming up called Who Do You Choose to Be? Who do you choose to be today? I always ask my patients that in the morning before they go to school. Who do you want to be today? Do you want to be, like, what attributes? Do you want to be patient? Do you want to be kind? I think not instead of, but in addition to reading a book at night, like, why not play a guided meditation? That is so easy. Go to Insight Timer. It's free. They have so many different guided meditations for kids. Play a 3 minute or a 5 minute meditation and do that with your child. Because again, if you're teaching them those tools ahead of time, it's more of a self-soothing. It's not just about, oh my gosh, now we're anxious, we're in the moment, people are really stressed. What can we do? So I think it's crucial. And then the other thing, like I laughed because I thought to myself, I just looked at the time and I know I have an alarm on my phone that goes off 3 times a day and it's to the sound of birds. and it basically is just for me to take a breath. So it goes off, I take 3 breaths, and it's awesome because my patients have actually picked up on it. They're like, "Oh, there's your alarm for your breathing, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it together." So I think it's also about modeling.
I love that.
We really have to model these behaviors. We can't expect our kids to use coping skills if we're not using them ourselves, right? So when we get in the car, and this is another one that I do when I pull up to work a lot of times. I'll sit there just for a minute and I'll do a little self talk like, "You got this. We're going to be positive today. Today is going to be a really good day. And let's take 3 breaths." And that's something you could do with your child, with your children in the back seat. Again, it's all about the modeling piece. So yeah, layering it with another activity, whether it's walking, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's if someone's you pray, maybe it's taking 3 breaths after the prayer. But I think there's just like these small things that you can do. And I will say, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I don't really like box breathing, and that's okay. I like 4-7-8 breathing. I think everyone is going to find something that works for them. And just like anything in life, we need to figure out what works for you, what's going to resonate for you. So I think just trying different things, but yeah, incorporating them, starting small is, I think, the way to go. And then building from there. I know I sit and people say, "Oh, I sit for 30 minutes in the morning." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I sit literally, I'm not going to, honestly, I sit for 5. And that's huge for me
Mhm.
because I'm a mover. My mind is busy. And so I think we have to really just encourage people to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I love that. I love that
Yeah.
there was a couple things you brought up there that I think are important because sometimes I can be guilty of this, right? If I can't do it all, then I'm not going to do any of it. And so I know there's people out there thinking that if there's no way I can breathe. And I actually came to breath because a lot of my clients, I meditate. I try to meditate before I even get out of bed. And I have been trained in transcendental meditation, which is a mantra. And my husband still is pretty good with his transcendental meditation, but I really love guided meditations. And during my healing, I was in a program where there was a lot of guided meditation around different connecting to my heart, to forgiveness. So I really got on the board with guided meditation. And so that's my jam. I can still do my transcendental meditation, being quiet with my mantra, but that kind of, I like to pop the ear things in and like sometimes I don't even get out of bed. I just lay there and before I even start my day and I do a 20 minutes because I would just be tossing and turning at that point because I'm actually awake, but I really don't want to get up. I don't want to get up yet.
Hmm.
So for
Right.
me, that works. It's not going to work for everybody. And what I was seeing with clients was I was trying to do this program with them around all this meditation, and some of them were just so resistant to even the word meditation. And so I said this a million times, probably on this podcast. I think breath is a little bit of bait and switch. It gives that monkey, that busy mind, something to think about with the breath, whether they're counting, and then they're able to usually, not 100%, they're usually able to start to settle down. And it doesn't have to be an hour and a half session. It doesn't have to be a half hour. It can be 5 minutes in the morning. It can be 5 minutes, 3 minutes in the car. It doesn't have to be, but we are a society that think it's all or nothing. So if I just can't do it, I'm not going to do it. I'm resistant. It doesn't feel good. I'm not doing it. And so I challenge people to get curious about, is it your resistance? Is it just a hell no for you? I don't want to do this. This doesn't feel good. Or is it more like sometimes we have that resistance in our body because something's uncomfortable? And I do
Hmm.
recognize that a lot of people, if you are really high strung and a people pleaser and you've been in this fight or flight mode for so long, if I'm going to say to you, we're going to sit and meditate now. Your body are you insane? Even if your mind isn't saying that, your body is giving you these sensations because your body maybe is not ready to slow to that pace. That's really
Oh,
hard for someone to go from fight or flight, even though they don't know they're in it. I didn't know I was in it 100% of the time. So for me to just in the beginning start to meditate was very resistant. I got through it. Everybody's different. And that's how I actually initially came to the breath because I was like, okay, people are struggling. I know this works. For me, like, how can I explore this breath more? Because it is a bait and switch, I think, because they're giving their mind something to think about and then they come under. So whether it's long or short, I think that's important for people to know. Like, everybody maybe isn't going to be a meditator. Maybe you're not in your journey. If you've even started like a self-development healing journey, you might get there, but you may not. And that's okay. They're both okay. Meeting them
oh,
I have a client who cannot do breath work.
mm,
She just You know what she can do? She can do box breathing. Do you know why?
Okay.
Because she holds her breath all the time, and that's normal for
Mhm.
her. With box
Right.
breathing, there's a breath hold, the breath holds. So for her, that's for her body, that's comfortable. Do I think that she'll eventually be able to do breath work? Yes, and I think it would be helpful. But I had to switch my whole dynamic up with her because I can't just say this is what's going to work. This isn't where she's at. You have to meet your, if you're working with someone, they have to meet you where you're at. And if you're doing this yourself, you have to meet yourself where you're at with compassion,
Mhm.
kindness, and love, because the box breath may feel good to you. The box breath may not feel good to you. The guided
Right.
meditation with some breath may feel good to you. Being in silence may feel good to you. And just
Mhm.
breathing.
Yeah.
But
No,
we live in a society that's it's either right or wrong, but this can be right and this can be right.
yeah.
And so I love that all those comments you brought up about meeting them where they are and that you don't like box breath, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, I completely agree 100%. And again, everybody's different. I think if someone has a monkey mind and they're not going to sit with compassion and they're going to sit there and beat themselves up because they're having, we on average, what do we have? 30,000 thoughts a day. So if you're sitting for 5 minutes, that's quite a few thoughts. And so if you're not able to, have the quiet mind, yeah, you start judging yourself. This is uncomfortable. I don't like it. I'm not doing it right. So that's why I'm a big fan of guided meditation for that reason. I really like the metta meditation, the meditation for love and kindness, because of the fact that there's words to it. And so I'm saying these words back to myself, and I like the whole principle behind it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about meeting someone where they're at, and it doesn't have to be this or that. And that's what there's no science to it. And that's why I always say, let's explore. Let's talk about the basics. I have a couple basics that I always tell people. This is how I think it's a good way to start. And then I have like 5 or 10 different types of breathing exercises that I teach. And that's what I remember having a worksheet when I worked in juvenile detention. And I would have the list of different types of breathing exercises and just a little description underneath. And I knew sleeping bedtime was the most difficult time. So I would say, let's try this. Go in your room tonight and try 4-7-8 breathing or equal breathing or whatever it is. And tomorrow night, try this one and let's see which one again works for you or is the most helpful. Yeah, I think there's just so much you can do with it. There's so much flexibility in there.
I liked what you said too when we were talking about parents and younger kids or even teenage kids, right? What can we do at home, right? If we're not regulated. So that's the first thing, getting real with if you have a child that is like hard at bedtime or difficult during the day, there's so much going on and we can get into that. What's in the foods, what we're eating, the social media, the screen
Mhm.
time, like there's so much coming up with that. And we're seeing a lot of that, like, right, with the kids, they're like the dopamine hits are like, it's just hard. And so if we're not regulated, and this isn't a judgment because I can think back to when I was a young parent, right? Like I wasn't regulated. Like I don't even know what that was.
Mhm.
And so then one of my kids was a little bit harder. And so I just remember like having those moments, right? But now I have 3 granddaughters. And
Mhm.
so I incorporate, they come and they play the singing bowls. They do a little bit of yoga. I bought this book, simple as buying this book that had some easy children's yoga poses and got them each their own
Mhm.
yoga mat. And then at the back of the book was a guided meditation. So they lay and then they want me to read them the guided meditation, which is like 3 minutes. And there's one for morning and one for night. So you don't have to really think about anything. It's all in the book. And then we're talking about what they want to put out in the world because the clouds are floating away. So what we're putting out in the world, like you were talking about. And so
Mm.
then that made them start to think, what does this mean? And what do I want to put out in the world?
Mm.
And then they
Yeah, I
talk
love
about
that.
kindness or love or their friends and then I remember my husband didn't, their grandfather was like, he was trying not to participate. And they were like, Grandpa, come and sit on the
Yeah.
yoga mat. And they wanted, and they were like, I don't know. I think the oldest one is 6 at the time. So they were under the age of 6, but they could connect to this practice. So that doesn't mean
Yeah.
they're all the time doing that. But actually, after I started to introduce that slightly, their mom called me one day and was like, sent me a picture of my older granddaughter in her room, like sitting cross-legged. And she asked her what she was
No.
doing. She said, I'm having some alone time. I'm meditating. No,
I
they're
love that
starting to
alone time.
talk about their emotions and that they need a time.
Mhm,
They're giving themselves their own time out. And it's not perfect. I'm not saying I've created this like amazing thing, but we're starting to introduce. So I think that's an important point for the listeners. Like you can take these small steps that Kim's talking about, introducing 5 deep breaths at breakfast before you're leaving in the morning, creating an intention for all of you to set out on your day, doing it in the car. Because I'm sure you hear this too. I hear it. We're all busy. So people are like, you want me to incorporate that into my day? But can you imagine the time we're using like fighting with our kids or fighting with our partner or like that energy we use? What if we just took a little bit of that for a month and saw the changes that could maybe happen?
mhm. Yeah,
And
for
the
sure.
awareness that we're bringing.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, I think another good time you said that, it's funny you say that because I think a red light is a nice time to take a breath too. I think red lights are really frustrating for people, and so taking a breath can be helpful. Yeah, I actually, again, education's my background. With my coaching practice, right now, I'd like to get into the school systems. I'm here in Texas. I work for an organization out of New York that goes into schools and teaches mindfulness and stress reduction to teachers and things that they can model and then use in their classroom. And they also work with students, which I'm just so happy about that. But here where I am, I want to start getting into the schools and doing more of this because if it's not going to be offered at home, I would love for parents to jump on board. But again, people are busy. They might not have the resources. They might never have never heard of this. So even if you can have a child go home and teach their parent this, how awesome is that?
No, because I have a funny story. I was at my granddaughter's house. They're all sisters, and I hurt my back. So it was literally on the floor. I went to pick the youngest one up, and something gave away in my back, like
Mhm.
bad. Like I was on the floor. I couldn't move off of my knees. I had to call my husband to come over and help me. Like it was a bad spasm. And I don't remember if it was the little one or the middle one that came in the room and it was like, Grandma, you just have to remember to breathe. Like on the floor in excruciating pain, probably holding my breath. You know what I mean? Like that moment where
Mhm.
if you've ever had a back injury, like I could not move from point A to point B. Like I was like, I couldn't believe I had to call my husband. But the reality is one of them, I can't remember which one came in and was like, Grandma, she was so calm. You just have to breathe. We're going to breathe. And so she was helping me breathe through it. And
Yeah.
then it honestly, it clicked to me like, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, I got to breathe. I got to move with my breath. Like she didn't go into that detail, but then it clicked something for me like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I taught you how to breathe.
Yeah.
And so I started
Right.
breathing through this, and you can actually move with your breath. Like you move your body with your breath and the pain is less,
Mm.
right? Like we tell patients, like breathe when we're getting them up or whatever.
Mhm.
But really it's very slow. But if you move very slowly, I was able to finally get up through the breath. The breath is what got
Mhm.
me up because my husband
Wow.
once wanted to yank me up, right? He was like, but I couldn't even take the pain. And I was able to breathe and move with the breath because on the exhale, I'm moving, right? On the inhale, I'm moving, on the exhale, I'm moving. And so this is what I'm talking about. There's so many ways, and maybe I just overwhelmed people with that. But here, I just introduced that to my granddaughters. I'm not saying they're going around telling everybody to breathe, but they're sponges at that age. So
Complete. Yeah.
so
Yep.
they take it in way easier than we do. And they put that away and she brought it back to me. She was like, you
Mhm.
just have to breathe. And I was like, yeah, I need to calm
Right.
myself down and I just need to breathe. And I started breathing. And yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. And so what we mirrored each other and there's so much we can do. So much insight from you today. I love all of what you're doing. I think it's so needed because we need to start, right? Society can be very difficult right now. I do think we're in a shift, an energetic shift, whether you believe the woo or not. I think that there's a shift happening. I think people are more aware about trauma and breath work and mindfulness and all the things are definitely more out there than they were even 2 years ago, I think. But there's still a lot to do. So having people like you in these places that are going to allow our youth to have a different life than we had, honestly. Because there's so
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
anxiety in the world right now, even and for the
Hmm.
kids, right? You're seeing it.
Hmm.
So I love the things that you brought up about what parents can do for themselves and then what they can do with their kids. And I know people don't have time, but just take a look at your phone, at your screen time, and how much time you spend scrolling. Because I just want to call people out on that because I'm calling myself out on that when I say I don't have time. Look at how much socials, like we're so just taking 5 minutes away from that in the morning and in the evening, doing it at a red light. If the kids are in the car with you at the red light, them in for 3 breaths with you at the breakfast table, doing a guided meditation. You don't have to make it up. There are tons of books out there. And the kids, I can promise you to the audience that they will eat it up.
I
And
agree.
then they'll be asking for it. My granddaughters come now and they're like, "Are we doing yoga? What about the clouds? Are we doing the clouds?" Or if I forget the guided meditation at the end, they're like, "Aren't we doing the clouds?" So they
That's
they keep
awesome.
me accountable and finding things to soothe them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. And they're really fortunate and blessed to have you. I wish that there were more people like you.
That's great, but to say I was not that person when my kids were little. I just want to
Yeah.
own that. Like I didn't have the emotional intelligence at that time. I didn't understand my trauma, my generational trauma. I didn't understand how I was showing up in the world. I'm not saying I was bad. I'm just saying that's the real thing. And now I do know different. And it's still a struggle sometimes for all of us. We're human, but I do want to show up differently so that they see a less stressed way that this woman now is showing up for them. And I could shame myself about how I wasn't able to show up when my kids were little like that, but I was a different person and only move forward.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
And so I think that's an important piece for people to understand. You can always start. Each day is a different day. You can always start anew and try something new. So thank you so much. I think that the work you're doing in the world is amazing. I think that you need to keep at it with whatever
Thank
it
you.
is that you choose to do. I think working with the youth is just really to be so applauded and so needed at this time. So I really am so appreciative that you came on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I could talk about this all day. And so I appreciate having this platform to do that. I appreciate it.
Anything you want to share, Kim, with the audience? Anything that you're doing? Anything you want to share? I'm going to share all of Kim's information when the podcast comes out. I'm not sure. This is going to be a series of 4 different breathwork people that are using breathwork in their life, whether they're a breathwork facilitator, they're using breath in their practice, in their life. I wanted everybody to get a different experience of how breath can be changing for you and can help you really change your life with a simple breathwork practice. And I really wanted you to hear it from all different aspects. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I would just said my information would be attached. I would say feel free to reach out with any, just if you want to have a conversation around how you can implement it. But yeah, I do have, and this might not come out in time, but I have a workshop series coming up that I'm really excited about. It's called Who Do You Choose to Be? And it's a 4-week virtual series on Wednesday evenings for teens. And we will be meeting once a week and we'll have different topics and just things that I didn't experience. What are your values? What are your strengths? Who do you want to be? What are some things that inspire you? What are your goals? Just in between. And I'm also adding some mindfulness and some breath work in there. And then in between sessions, each participant will have a 30-minute session with me.
When does that
So
start?
yeah, I'm sorry, was that?
When does that start?
That starts July 17th and it goes through August 7th. And yeah, I'm really excited. I made it virtual so that it's accessible for everybody. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's my first time doing it. And yeah, I don't know of anything else like it. So I just thought this is what I want to get out there. Again, it's one of those things, and you said this, we're at where we are. And there's things that I wish I had done and I could say woulda, coulda, shoulda, whatnot, but this is where I'm at. And if I can help other people, and just whether it's through education, empowerment, through role modeling, get there more easily, that's my mission, really.
I
Not
love
to
it.
have to struggle so much. There's things that we can do, tools that we can use to struggle less. And that's really what I want to put out there. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. And so I'll list all of Kim's stuff, and I don't know when this is gonna air, but hopefully it's gonna air before that. But she'll share that workshop with me, and I'll share it with my socials because that is really needed. And so I love what you're doing again. Thank you so much. And
Thanks,
everybody
Sally.
have a great day, and I'll see you next week to talk more about breathwork changing your life.